Hello boxing fans, today in this video we're going to discover who actually killed Sonny Liston. So without wasting your time, let's get started from the start. It was late in the evening when Geraldine Liston returned home and found newspapers piled up at her door. She had tried to call her husband, heavyweight boxer Sonny Liston, for about 2 weeks, but had been unable to reach him. When her most recent contact went unanswered, she apologized to her mother, this Friday, whom she had been visiting in St. Louis for Christmas, and returned to Las Vegas to check on him. The doors were unlocked and the house was in darkness. Geraldine felt uneasy. She hoped to find her husband in one of his usual spots, perhaps playing cards with a friend or watching TV. Instead, as she entered their large split-level home, she was struck by a sickening smell that hung heavy in the winter air. She thought he must have cooked and left something on the stove, she would say in a rare interview years later. But she went in the kitchen and she didn't see anything there. She followed the strange odor to an upstairs bedroom where she found her husband. Once the most feared fighter in America, he was sprawled at the foot of their bed, wearing only his underwear. His body was bloated. He had been dead for at least 6 days, and there was dried blood streaking from his nose. Geraldine led the couple's 7-year-old son, Daniel, downstairs and told him to wait there. She did not ring the police for several hours. According to a Las Vegas police report, she first called her lawyer and then tried desperately to reach a doctor. When one finally arrived, he could do little more than confirm what she already knew. Charles Sonny Liston was pronounced dead at the scene. It was well after midnight when the police arrived at the Liston house, which was in an affluent, largely white suburb called Paradise Palms. The doorstep was cluttered with days' worth of unopened milk bottles, as well as a stack of unread Las Vegas Sun newspapers, which investigators would later use to determine the exact day Liston had died. Several windows had been left open, but this did little to ease the stench of rotting flesh. Sergeant Dennis Caputo, now 69, was one of the first officers to arrive. The call came over dispatch, and we were aware that it was the Liston residence, he tells the BBC from his home in the city. But in Las Vegas, it wasn't unusual to get high-profile calls like that. For me, it wasn't a big deal. He quickly began a thorough search. It was a very nice house, he says, well-kept and orderly. I got the feeling it hadn't been lived in too much. There was nothing to suggest, at least on first sight, that something sinister may have happened. There were no apparent signs of forced entry, no visible weapons, and no signs of a struggle, he recalls. Sergeant Caputo was escorted to the master bedroom, where he found a small bag of marijuana and a glass of vodka alongside Liston's prone corpse. He was wearing a t-shirt and boxer shorts and was in a state of decomposition, he says. While some accounts of Liston's death say a revolver was discovered in the bedroom, Sergeant Caputo remembers things differently. There were no visible wounds and no weapons were found. Shortly after, he discovered a small amount of heroin in the kitchen, but no syringe. The kitchen was spotless except for a penny balloon on the counter, he says. It was common knowledge that these kinds of balloons were used to transport illegal narcotics. I will also say that it was pretty well known that Liston was a part-time user. Most reports of Liston's death state that fresh needle marks were found on his arm. While Geraldine has disputed that her husband ever used drugs, some have alleged that she may have cleared the syringe away. Geraldine and her attorney were in the house for an unknown period of time before we arrived, Sergeant Caputo says. I did find it odd that she called her attorney when the body was discovered, rather than the police. But others, including some of Liston's closest friends, say that he would never have used heroin because he was terrified of needles. He wouldn't even go to a doctor for a checkup, for fear some doctor would want to stick a needle in him, his former trainer, Johnny Taco, told the Washington Post in 1989. Liston's body was eventually moved into a waiting ambulance. According to some witness accounts, his vast weight proved too much, and he was dropped several times. It was an undignified exit, reminiscent of a felled boxer being carried out of the ring. An autopsy would later reveal that traces of morphine and codeine, of a type commonly produced by the breakdown of heroin, had been in Liston's system, but there was not enough of it to definitively state that he had died of an overdose. Officially, the Clark County coroner ruled that the boxer died of natural causes, specifically lung congestion and heart failure. It was a verdict that, in the eyes of many boxing fans, only raised more questions. How could a man, still active as a professional fighter, suddenly drop dead? Was it possible that he could have been training while using hard drugs? And wasn't he afraid of needles anyway? The strange circumstances of Liston's death and the murky life he had been living at the time have fueled fierce speculation about what may have happened to him. Some, such as Sergeant Caputo, accept the coroner's verdict of natural causes, but many still struggle to do so, and the prevailing theory, one that has only gained traction since his death, is that his criminal connections came back to bite him, and he was murdered by the mob. The whole Liston story is so shrouded in mystery, says Rob Steen, who wrote a biography of the boxer. There's so many people who died who might have been able to shed a little bit of light on it. But I don't think anyone ever really believed he had a heart attack. Many people still believe that the mob changed the postmortem report with the help of their connections.